All right, welcome back to the program. Hour number 2 on a Thursday afternoon. Bright sunshine out there, gorgeous day, lots of melting going on, and that's good news. Went for my walk last night after working and found that it was, a little bit easier than I thought it was going to be. A lot of the sidewalks were still snow-covered, hint, hint, hint. For us walkers, you got to get out there and you got to do it. And it's against the law to keep the snow on your sidewalk anyway, so you should get out there and do it as quickly as you possibly can before the next snow falls next week, right? Don't even want to think about that. We'll talk about that more as it gets a little bit closer. All right, joining me in studio for this hour of our day is Nick Viveiros. You probably heard Nick on the program before, but if you haven't, Nick is a very sharp guy who I've known since he was just a little toddler, and he's a Fall River native. And he is already a sophomore at Suffolk University up in Boston, studying law, studying political science, and he actually hosts a couple of radio shows of his own on Suffolk Radio. And Nick, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a little while now.
It's been a little while, yeah. Well, I didn't want to interrupt your studies and have your father come hunt me down if you got kicked out of college or something. So I figured it's break time. And, what better time to get a young man in than now? We're talking about a lot of issues that impact young people. And so I want to get your perspective on what's going on, and hopefully we'll engage with some callers. Yeah. Before the break, and much of yesterday, we're talking about this student walkout yesterday. Mm-hmm. And this is something that, I don't know, was it canceled in Fall River because of the weather?
I wasn't paying a lot of attention.
There was no school in Fall River, I think.
They didn't have school yesterday.
No school, so it would have been canceled.
So, yeah, probably. But I know in Boston they also didn't have school, and they still did it.
They still had it?
So I think it depends on the student groups.
Right. In New Bedford, it was canceled, but I'm told that it will be held at another time. There was a case already in Connecticut.
Yeah, I was listening to that one. Yeah.
All right, and this is from New Milford, Connecticut, and parents have hired a lawyer, and they're saying, you know what, we don't like what happened yesterday. You're manipulating our kids. You're trying to indoctrinate our kids. You're using taxpayer money. Some of the language used specifically in the suit. The decision to allow this to occur in the public schools involves issues concerning adherence to law and policy, the manipulation of minors, the misuse of tax dollars, and indoctrination of and political activism during school hours. Now, first of all, what are your thoughts on the reaction to young people to the Parkland shooting? And then we'll get into the legal aspects of it later on.
Sure. Because I think those are two very important and very different things.
I think you're right. Absolutely.
They're very different.
Yeah.
I think that it is, there's been a level of activism among young people that we really haven't seen on other issues. And why exactly it happened at this shooting and it didn't happen after Sandy Hook, or it didn't happen after the one at the community college or Virginia Tech, I'm not sure why it happened at this exact moment in time, but it did. And there is something about this shooting. I remember sitting down with all of my roommates, because we're all very involved in politics and we have that talk show together, Get Political. And we sat down on Valentine's Day that night after we had all, seen our girlfriends and they'd gone home. And we were just sitting and talking about it. And we all kind of didn't have a response because it was so shocking that this could happen again. And that it was so many people injured and so many people killed this time, and that it happened on Valentine's Day of all times. And there was just, we all recognized that there was something about it that was different. We weren't sure exactly what about it was different. And I think ever since then, we've seen this incredible influx.
Well, have you analyzed it since then? Do you know what was different about this one? Have you figured it out? Because I agree with you. I agree with that assessment 100%. This was different. Somehow or another, this one took it over the edge.
I think a couple of the details. First, there were so many warning signs that this young man, whose name I will not use, was going to do something like this. Like, he commented on a YouTube video, "I want to be a school shooter." Mm-hmm. And I think somebody from Massachusetts of all places, actually reported him to the FBI, and the FBI did nothing. The police were called to his house tons of times. His mother had recently passed away, so he really didn't have anybody. He was a ticking time bomb. So I think that's the first thing, is like with the shooter in Connecticut at Sandy Hook, there were signs of mental illness, but there were no signs that he was going to become outwardly violent, at least none that I could really find, some 6 years later. But with this one, there were so many warning signs that this young man was going to do something.
So this was a case where the system clearly failed.
Yes, and it failed further when you have the case of the officer of the Broward County Sheriff's Office just standing outside the building. not going inside. You know, how many lives could have been saved if that had happened instead?
And just as you're speaking, we just got a Fox News flash on my phone here saying that Florida court releases video showing ex-deputies standing outside the school during Parkland shooting. So there's actually video.
They have video of them doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah. So the fact that the system failed and failed so badly at all levels, you think that's what made this different from the others?
I think that's one of it. And I think the second thing is the fact that it was a high school this time. You have people who are typically, like, I know I became very politically, I mean, I had always been interested in politics, but I became actually politically active in high school. I think also if you look at some of the people who have become the faces of this movement, like David Hogg is a debater, so he's naturally probably involved in politics and has been for a while. So I think that contributed to the activism. It's been kind of hard to determine exactly what it was that made this so different besides the systemic failure. But ever since Parkland, we have certainly seen a rise in student activism. And I personally, I think it's a good thing.
Well, let me ask you this, and I always think it's great too. I always think it's great. My only issue with all of this is that it's taking place during school hours. I think it should take place. If you're truly an activist, you're going to show up after school. If you don't care about it, you're not going to show up. During school hours, in many cases, you don't have a lot of choice, or you want to go along to get the hell out of math class or whatever. So, so I think it should have been done after school, but we'll get to that in a little bit. The reaction to this from the students was a little bit different from what I would have imagined. My reaction, if I was a student at Parkland and I went out there and I went to the media and I was all upset and, you know, pissed off and everything else, would have been, protect us. Why are you not protecting us? As opposed to take away the guns or stricter gun rules. I wouldn't have thought that way. That seems to me to be a strange reaction to that. I mean, why didn't you demand, greater protection for the schools first? Why wasn't that the first thought here?
I think there's several reasons. First, for a lot of people, protecting us, and I'm not saying I agree with this or disagree with it, but I think for a lot of people, especially young people, protecting us would be taking away guns. I think that's the immediate thought. You know, what caused this? I think they look and they see that a firearm was used instead of something like a hunting knife.
But isn't that overly simplistic?
I'm not. Yes, I agree that it is overly simplistic. But I think the reason that was the first kind of gut reaction is because that's the weapon that was used. And
but why didn't the kids demand? I mean, I reacted the same way that you did and that most people did, that this one was different from all the other ones. And somehow we'd reached a point where something had to be done. My gut immediately was, get to these schools and protect them. Put barbed wire around them if you have to. Put guards on the roof. I was calling for Rambo on the roof of every school. And protect these schools, not for the students, for the teachers, for the employees, and enough is enough. I mean, we're never going to remove guns from society. It's never going to happen.
No, it's not.
So we have to protect the schools. How many times is this going to happen before we say our schools are unprotected? Students, teachers, employees, they're all sitting ducks sitting there. So that was my first reaction. And then I heard everybody go to obviously the media and the left are going to go for the Second Amendment and the guns. That's the knee-jerk reaction happens every time. But then when I heard the students say that too, my reaction if I had been in Parkland was, get the hell over here and protect us. Put some guards outside these buildings. Guards that are going to go in and do something.
I was going to say there was a guard.
Yeah, there was a guard. There were several guards.
Did absolutely
apparently
nothing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was kind of confused, I guess, when I got that reaction from the kids. I was expecting it from the politicians and the media, but when the kids went after the guns first, I was kind of confused by that.
And I also think part of it with the kids is at this point, I know if something had happened like this, I went to Bishop Stang, for the listeners that don't know, if something like this had happened at my high school, I think the first thing I would feel is fear. So I think a lot of the reactions that you've seen have been based on fear. And it's absolutely understandable fear. I don't think it's misplaced fear. I think it's something to be afraid of.
Yeah.
But I think that's why you're seeing that from the kids especially. It's because they're afraid, as they should be. If you can't go to school without somehow thinking somebody's going to come and gun you down, then there is something to be afraid of. I personally would not be opposed to having an armed resource officer at every high school. Like in the way I look at it, I think that would actually be a great benefit, but only if the resource officer is, a trained, like the way we have our police at Suffolk. There's a push to arm them right now. They're not armed, but they're sworn officers of the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office.
What, are they going to throw a book at somebody if they walk in the door with a gun?
Well, the point of bringing them up is to say that I think that if you're going to have resource officers armed, they should be sworn officers of the sheriff's department. I think they should be properly trained, and I think they should carry a firearm. As for other responses like arming teachers, there was a case a couple of weeks ago when a teacher with a weapon barricaded himself in a classroom. I don't think...
But didn't threaten anybody. He didn't threaten any other students or anything like that.
No, but
let me ask you this, because I had the mayor, and we're speaking, by the way, with Nick Viveiros, Fall River native, who is a sophomore at Suffolk University, studying law and also political science. And so we're chatting about the young person's response to all of this.
Yeah.
But I mean, we don't have metal detectors at the doors of our schools. There's nobody there frisking anybody going in. How do we know how many teachers per day are showing up in New Bedford High School that might be carrying a gun? Or how many students are showing up at the schools each day with a gun that we just don't know about?
I think in Massachusetts, the likelihood of a teacher being armed is probably less, just because it is so hard to get a firearm in this state. Especially, it's hard to do it legally,
I hear you can go into junior high school and plop down $50 and get a handgun. That's what I hear. So, I mean, it may not be that hard.
Seems
like everybody has one.
Especially in cities. I mean, I know that cities like New Bedford and Fall River that can be sometimes plagued by violence, it is easier to get a firearm.
Right.
But I mean, in the state as a whole, I don't think there are that many teachers that are armed. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. I just don't think there are that many.
My point of that, though, is that we're worried about one teacher who went over the edge, who happened to have a gun. He was apparently allowed to carry that gun, too. But and he went in a classroom and then maybe threatened himself, didn't threaten anybody else. But that could happen at any school, anywhere that doesn't have a metal detector or people that are there. So, I mean, to me, that's kind of a straw argument against arming teachers.
Yeah, I just think it's something to think about.
What's wrong with having an armed teacher, somebody who's maybe an Iraq veteran or an Afghanistan veteran? They went to war, they've come home, they've got a degree, they went on the GI Bill, got their degree, they're teaching school now, they've been trained in carrying weapons, they do the training. We had some experts on from Ohio fairly recently that are training teachers all over the country now through a program where they can be a first responder medically and also learn how to control the situation if violence does break out. So these guys are trained. They have to be recertified 4 times a year in order to carry guns. What's wrong with having a teacher that's got a weapon just in case somebody comes in? And the Suffolk security guard's throwing books at the guy because he's got no gun.
I think, first of all, I am part of the... I wrote an interesting article for the Suffolk Journal about arming our officers because I think that's something that we need to look at. I would personally feel safer if our officers were armed. The article was not really taking a side on the issue. We interviewed people that were both for and against it and talked about the reasons why. But I personally would support that. Now, I think it really depends on the teacher. I think that in certain situations it might be an appropriate response, in others it might not. The only concern I have about veterans of armed conflicts having weapons inside a classroom is the risk that they have to develop a mental illness like PTSD. That's the only concern I would have. I would not be completely opposed to somehow using this nation's veterans to help the situation, as long as there's the proper system in place, and as long as that system doesn't fail.
All right, so here we have a situation like yesterday. Almost immediately after Parkland, this whole thing gets politicized, okay? And so now you have this event yesterday, this walkout, National Walkout Day. Students from all across the country are going to walk out of classes, and they did from Maine all the way out to Hawaii. They walked out. Unfortunately, in California, there were a couple of school districts where they were violent and causing problems, but breaking police car windows and doing various things like that. But that was only a very small minority of them. Parents are upset. We've heard from parents here in New Bedford who were never even notified these events were going to go on. Apparently here in New Bedford, and I know you can't speak specifically about what's going on in New Bedford, but they were going to have a day yesterday where the in some form or another, this was going to be observed from kindergarten all the way up to the high school. And parents are calling me saying, we never got any notification of this. So had the day not been called off because of snow, my kid would have been going to this program without my without me knowing about it. And people are upset about that. In Connecticut, they're suing, saying you're using taxpayer money to indoctrinate students or to advance a political cause that we don't approve necessarily of, and you can't do that. That's against the law. And they're also saying that by doing this, you're opening the door to any other group now that wants to walk out or protest or whatever, you've sanctioned this using taxpayer money. You've got to sanction that. You've got no choice. So, what do you think about the legal argument? You're going to school to a law school.
Yeah,
What do you think about the legal aspect of all of this?
Well, I think it partially depends on the age of the student. If you have a 14-year-old freshman, a 15-year-old sophomore, 16-year-old sophomore, 17-year-old junior, they are still minors that are subject to their parents. I think the only legal gray area here is when it comes to the seniors, who would be 18 years old, as to what they can and can't do. I think that if a school was to punish someone for walking out, well, first of all, before I go on that tangent, I want to answer your main point here about parents not being notified. Mm-hmm. I think that's wrong. If you are sending your child, a minor, especially if they're a minor, to school to be educated and something else is happening, there needs to be a notification. We'd send home letters all the time if there was an assembly, if there was some sort of field trips, and you can't do that with a protest. I think that's a situation when parents would need to be notified, even if you could say, look, this is what's going to happen. There are some students who want to participate in this. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, let the school know.
Right. Especially
if the kids are minors, because in that situation, the parents do have the final say. I think that that being said, the punishment a school could impose on a student is allowable. If a school does decide to punish a student for walking out, I'm not saying I agree with it, but if you look at the way a school is set up, like from the administrative side, they have the authority to do that. So they can punish you. They can punish. They can suspend you. And civil disobedience isn't about everybody bowing down to you and allowing you to do your thing. It's called disobedience for a reason. If you're gonna do it, you need to accept the consequences.
Right. You got to understand there's a risk involved.
Even if I don't agree with them, right? There are consequences.
You don't have a First Amendment right to get up and walk out of second grade and go protest.
No,
you don't have that right. That's not your First Amendment right.
No.
Now, your First Amendment right would be violated if they told you weren't able to express your point of view. But you don't have a right to get up and walk out of class. That's
especially if you're like a young elementary or middle school child. That's just a safety risk for the young students. I think the only place where such a protest would be appropriate would be a high school, and there would need to be certain parameters around it, and there would need to be parental notification, and there would need to be a.
We received a number of calls, and I get some emails and letters from parents in Somerset, and apparently there was a protest in Somerset last week or the week before. That was sanctioned by the administration, and kids were allowed to walk out with the teachers, and the parents weren't notified about that. As a matter of fact, the media was notified, and the news helicopters were up in the air, and a parent told me, I saw my kid on TV walking out of school. The press was notified this was happening, but the parents weren't notified. Yeah, and there are a lot of angry parents over that feel that their kids are being manipulated politically by groups that maybe have different points of view from them, but that's not even the issue. The fact that they're being manipulated and the kids are being instructed to do things or allowed to do things that the parents maybe wouldn't approve of or didn't give their consent to.
Yeah, and I think in a situation like that there was a major failure on the part of the administration of the Somerset Berkeley Regional School District. Yeah. I think they should have notified the parents, and they should have told them what was happening, and they should have allowed for some parent input. Even if I don't agree with parents who would keep their children from attending the protest, their parents. They have the right to do that.
Well, most parents would feel, I would think anyway, at least my generation of parents, I know the position that I've had, my kids are out of school now, and I know how much you value education, obviously, because you're paying through the nose for a good one over at Suffolk University, and your dad is too. I send my kids to school to learn history and to learn civics and to learn geography and math and science and all of this kind, not to walk out, not to draft statements to the government on one position or another and then walk out of school. It's not what we're paying the schools for, and that's not our expectations. And if you look at our test scores statewide, I don't think we're in a position at this point to be telling kids you can go outside and march and make the number 17 on the football field. I think there's more important things that we should be doing with our kids in school right now. That's just my thought on it.
Yeah, and I completely understand that, especially from your perspective as a parent.
Yeah.
I might agree with what the students are doing, but I don't think that this has been handled the right way at all by school districts.
All right. Let me take a break, Nick. We're going to come back. Nick Viveiros, 508-996-0500 if you'd like to weigh in. We're trying to get a youth perspective on some of the things that are happening in our society right now. We'll come back. We'll do some more topics as well and take your phone call. Stay with us. All right, we got the next generation, and Nick Viveiros is a sophomore at Suffolk University, and he'll be sitting in a chair like this before much longer. In fact, he's already doing that. He's got a political talk show on Suffolk University radio, also a news program. He hosts 2 programs and goes to school, too, and studying law and political science, and someday is going to be the president of the United States, I promise you that. Either that or the president of CNN. I'm not sure which, but
I'll turn the network around.
Well, yeah, you could do that.
I'll turn the network around.
Absolutely. Help build up their ratings. They need it, right?
Yeah.
Fake news. Totally fake news. So anyway, speaking about totally fake news, what do you think of the first year of the Trump administration? Now, you were a Bernie guy, for those who don't remember the last time you were in.
Oh, but I would not be a Bernie guy anymore.
Oh, you would not, huh? So
I don't think that any of the candidates that ran in 2016, like at this state in the game, like the way I am politically right now, I don't think I could, in good conscience, support any of them.
So where are you at politically right now?
Probably center-left.
Center-left?
There are certain issues where I am further left than the average American, but there are other issues when I'm further right than the average liberal. So,
all right, so are you as far left as, say, Elizabeth Warren? Are you that far left? No. So who's somebody out there that's center-left right now that you think is a good prospect for
there was a good prospect for 2020. That's a different question.
Right. But just somebody that you're listening to right now.
I had a meeting last year. Do you remember Martin O'Malley?
Marty O'Malley, yeah, he
ran for the nomination.
Yeah,
he was the third person that kind of got all the air sucked out of him because it was just Hillary and Bernie going back and forth.
Yeah.
He visited us for a meeting for the Suffolk University College Democrats last year. And I remember my roommate, who's the president of the Suffolk University College Democrats, was sick that day. So I had to be the one to meet Martin O'Malley. And here I am, a college freshman, very, very nervous. This man was the governor of Maryland. He's important. He pulls up in an Uber wearing a leather jacket and aviator glasses and comes in to give us this talk. And the vision that he outlined that he would have put forth if he was president, I think it was common sense. It was coherent. It was center-left. It was certainly not as left as Bernie Sanders.
Well, what is center-left? What is center? What is it? Define that for me.
Well, I think when you go far left, you start losing some. You'll lose some people, especially because of economic beliefs. Like if you go far left, you're embracing a more socialist society, which, whether I agree with it or not, in America, a socialist society will never take root just because of the way this nation was founded and the way that we are as a culture. It can't happen here the way it does in Scandinavia. It just in the Nordic countries. It just can't happen. So I think that's where the far left goes wrong. I think they try to implement, and it sounds horrible, but I think they try to implement too much change too fast. They don't spend enough time talking to people and trying to get people to understand their point of view. They spend more time yelling at people. And I think that's where they go wrong. So that's where I break with a lot of the far left of the party. Whereas the center left, I don't have an informed opinion on Joe Kennedy yet, but I would not consider him a radical liberal. I would consider him, just from the way that he outlined the State of the Union response and the way that he has voted policy-wise, I think he's more of a center-left politician.
I thought that was a rather bizarre speech. I know some people that I read your dad's comments on Facebook. Your dad thought it was pretty cool, and and I'm looking at it saying, John Paul, come on, that was like totally off. I thought it was off the wall.
And I can understand why you'd think that. I mean, I totally understand.
Well, I mean, it was so dark and misery and gloom and everything. You know, on one side of the newspaper, we're getting the news that lowest unemployment level ever for blacks and Hispanics, more women are working, the economy's booming, jobs are coming back. And this guy's out there talking as though the end is near, and I just didn't...
I think that the one thing that I appreciated that he didn't do, and this is what really made me look at the speech in a different light, because I didn't used to like Joe Kennedy. I really did, and I'll publicly say that. I did not like Joe Kennedy. He voted present all the time. Mm-hmm. He never visited Fall River, even though it was part of the district that got him elected. Never came down here, because his district is so gerrymandered, it goes all the way up to Brookline. But
well, that was done on purpose to get rid of Barney Frank.
Oh, yeah, exactly. To listen to him, he never mentioned Donald Trump by name once. And I think that's important, especially as the Democratic Party goes forward. And I'm not a registered Democrat. I'm unenrolled. I am not part of the Democratic Party. I might tend to vote for Democratic politicians, but there are some Republicans that I would consider voting for. So down the line, the party needs to make itself the party of something rather than the party that is against something. I think that the one thing that you'll see a lot of the special elections, when Democrats succeed in special elections, it's because the Democrats tailor their message and they actually have a message. Like Doug Jones.
Yeah, but look what just happened in Pennsylvania, right? It appears as though Lamb is going to win over Saccone. It's razor thin. They're going to be
something
recounting
like 500
else.
votes.
Yeah, I mean it's really out of 250,000 that were cast. So they're going to do a recount, but it appears as though Lamb's going to win. He ran as being a Trump supporter. A Democrat being a Trump supporter. I'm going to work with Trump. I'm going to do, the infrastructure, this, that, and the other. I'm with Trump, Trump.
He had to.
So, So, I mean, what's that all about? Is that the way the Democrats are going to win back the House by being Trump supporters?
I think they're going to win back the House by being supporters of the people in their district and actually speaking up for them. They can't take direction from Nancy Pelosi. They can't take direction from Washington, D.C. They need to they know their district best. Like Connor Lamb knew this district voted for Trump by double digits. If I get up there and trash Donald Trump, I don't have a shot in hell to win this seat. So he was strategic. He painted himself as a God-fearing Democrat, somebody who was dedicated to the working people in that district, which goes through about 3 or 4 counties out south of Pittsburgh. And I think that's what drove him to victory. Whereas the other guy just painted himself as Trump before Trump. There was no real. He just.
Well, the Republicans keep putting these LinkedIn candidates up there, which is unfortunate because they have a chance to
look at Roy Moore down. In, that was I remember watching those election returns. I was shocked. I thought that because it was Alabama, that Roy Moore was going to win. I remember making bets with my roommates.
He was even too LinkedIn for Alabama.
Yeah, he was too LinkedIn for Alabama. Do you know how hard that is? Do you know how difficult it is, Barry, to be too LinkedIn for Alabama? It is very difficult.
Absolutely.
But if you look at him, I'm pretty sure Doug Jones is pro-life because he embraces the policies that will help him win. And whether or not he actually believes that, I don't know. I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt.
But here's another Democrat that had to promise that. So, I mean, these are not huge sweeping victories for the Democrats. I mean, you're running against, this idiot, Roy Moore. I mean, a dog could have beaten him on the polls, right? But you still got to run as a Republican in order to a Trump, not necessarily a Republican, but a Trump. You got to be a Trumpite in order to win some of these races.
Yeah.
And this thing in Pennsylvania, I mean, this is only for a few months anyway because
the district's gone. I was telling my dad about that. I'm like, this doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
This does not matter. I think it's symbolic because it shows Democrats that if they do this the proper way by actually caring about voters, they can win back Trump districts. But in the actual electoral scheme of things, you're absolutely correct. It doesn't matter. The district's going away in like 8 months anyway.
So in the meantime, you got Lamb and you got some of these other young Democrats that are out there that are beginning to realize, hey, we don't have a message. We're out here rudderless. We've got Schumer, who's a liability. We got Nancy Pelosi, who's a liability.
Even more of a liability, yeah.
Yeah, and then you got Hillary Clinton, who just won't go away. She's on videotape falling down the stairs again in India, and then she's giving this speech like, who in India gives a damn anyway why she lost the election? But she's on a speaking tour there. She must be getting paid. And she goes out and gives this foolish speech about how white women were forced into voting for Donald Trump by their bosses, husbands, and sons. That didn't ingratiate a whole lot of women or Democrats here back at home.
Yeah, and it's certainly not going to win back. I think the problem with Hillary Clinton, and look, I do recognize that there is value in her speaking out just because she's a former Secretary of State, she's a former First Lady. I think people do want to hear her speak, but I don't think a lot of people want to listen to her talk about 2016. And that could just be me, and I could be wrong.
No, you're right. I mean, that's bad news. As yesterday, we lost. Why do you want to keep revisiting our misery and bringing it up?
And there have been people and these people are not the mainstream. But there are people that have actually suggested her running again in 2020.
Yeah, that they can't be on the mainstream at all.
No, I don't think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, you got McCaskill and others. Claire McCaskill told the Washington Post Hillary's comments were fighting words. I think they were expressing their frustration with the status quo. I may not have agreed with their choice, but I certainly respect them, and I don't think that's the way you should talk about any voter, especially ones in my state.
Claire McCaskill has a hard race ahead of her.
She's got a problem.
She's Missouri, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, she definitely, that could be one of the seats they lose.
Yeah,
I've looked at the numbers, and that
so
could
any
be one
Democrats out there in purple or red states that are hanging on by their thumbnails have Hillary out there, and she's a total liability at this point.
Yeah.
And
somebody texted me about that this morning. They said, "What is Hillary Clinton doing? Does she want the Democratic Party to die?"
I I honestly think the woman has some mental health issues. I mean, she's getting paid a lot of money.
I think that's an insult to people with mental health issues.
So Hillary was never your cup of tea anyway.
I think she's just all about Hillary.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything more to it than that. The same way that I don't think that Trump is some deranged lunatic Hitler. I think he just cares about himself. That's my belief. Mm-hmm. I think that's the one way in which they are both similar, and why 2016 was such a terrible election to vote in. I didn't vote for either of them. You voted for Bernie, right? No. I didn't vote for Bernie.
No. Who'd you vote for? I don't remember if you told me.
I left the top of that ballot blank.
You didn't even vote?
My first presidential election, I left the top of that ballot blank because I could not, in good conscience, as a center-left, Catholic, God-fearing American, I could not vote for any of them.
But you weren't central-left then, right? You were Bernie left.
I was Bernie in the beginning of 2016, mostly because I worked for him, because I wanted to gain some political experience. I put it on my resume, but I even says does not reflect political endorsement.
Well, I was Bernie's press secretary one time, only because I had to eat. That was about it. Right?
Exactly. So you know how it is.
508-996-0500. Nick Viveiros is with us. He is a sophomore at Suffolk University in Boston, studying law and also studying political science. And he hosts a couple of political radio shows up on Suffolk University's radio stations. And we'll be back. Give us a call, 508-996-0500. We'll do more after this. All right, welcome back to the program. 508-996-0500 is the number. Nick is with us until the top of the hour. You're watching a future network news superstar over here, I'm telling you. Or this guy's going to be president, one or the other. Have you decided yet whether you're going to be president or on the networks pay more money?
I think president's too risky, and there's a lot of people that want to kill you. So
right.
I think I'm going to stick. News network, there's only a few people that want to kill you, and it's just the people that don't believe in political beliefs like you do.
All right, let's grab a call for Nick. 508-996-0500. You're on the air next on WBSM. Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hey.
Hey, I think if you would have walked out of school during this protest, and were I the principal, you would have gotten suspended. Now, what this is, it's a brainwashing scam to use kids as a tool to freely give up rights because they feel bad and things might be not be going the way that they want. It's like communist indoctrination with these pink hat marches and all this legislation that's going through. And these red flag legislations that no due process, ban these magazines, ban this AR.
Well, you know who said no due process, right? That was President Trump.
Yes, I know. When he said that kind of made me want to throw something through the TV, but I was wise.
Yeah, but you know what's interesting, both of you guys, is that nothing is getting done. I mean,
no.
And it always happens. We have these shootings. Everybody talks about, well, we got to do something. We're going to gun control, and this has got to go, and that's got to go. And then 2 weeks later,
Rhode Island, there's legislation being heard. There's legislation being heard in Massachusetts. These gun grabbers, if they could snap their fingers and poof, all weapons they don't like disappear, but they have to sell their soul to the devil, I think they would. You know, because I just live in this world where people will want to give up a basic right that makes this country unique among all other countries. We have the ability to keep the government respecting us, and these fools want to give that right away, you know? I can see one day in the future, because of national red flag legislation, all members, people, or citizens of the U.S., you are all hereby determinedly ordered to hand in all your guns and ammo. It's ridiculous where we're going with all this.
All right, my friend, let me hold you there. I'm going to grab another call. 508-996-0500. You're up next to WBSM. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm calling on a totally different subject
Go
here,
ahead.
and I insist on remaining anonymous.
Yep.
You know, there was an incident at the car barn. The maintenance guy who had been there for a few years passed away while shoveling.
All right, tell you what, we'll talk about that another time. We're in the middle of a political discussion. I've got a guest in the studio, so if you wanted to talk about one of the political issues we're talking about, that'd be wonderful. Otherwise, I think it'd be rather rude to change the subject on my guest who drove down here today to talk about some issues. So let's take that up a different day, all right? You're up next on WBSM. Good afternoon.
Hey, Barry and Nick, how are you today?
Doing well.
Good.
So after the election of Lamb yesterday in Pittsburgh, I heard Paul Ryan get up and speak about, you know, the election and how, you know, he took a fairly conservative stance to gain the voters. I'm surprised that Paul Ryan didn't take the opportunity to suggest that to anyone else in the midterms that wants to go along the same path, welcome to the party.
Yeah.
Because basically they're taking a complete conservative Republican stance, you know, kind of a sheep in wolf's clothing kind of thing versus what they really are all about.
Well, early on, I mean, we after the election and it began to play out, you know, the months went by and the months went by and all the Democrats were doing was talking about what was wrong with Trump rather than what they needed to do to reinvigorate their party and develop some issues. We all thought it was a suicide mission by these guys. So it's not surprising to see that some of these young people are saying, hey, wait a minute, we need to, if we're going to win, we need to come up with some issues, and we have to accept the fact that a lot of people in this country elected Trump, and they like some of what he's doing. And you know, it's not too surprising to see, and I think you're going to see a lot more of it on the Republican side, too, where you're going to see challenges rise up.
There's a lot of pressure on Elizabeth Warren because she's continued to lean harder left, and now with a couple of wins more towards a centrist Democrat, it's going to be much more difficult for her going forward.
What do you think, Nick, about Elizabeth Warren at this point?
Now, personally, I understand what you're saying, caller. I do disagree that it will be difficult for her to win, and that's only because of one thing, the demographics of Massachusetts. There's only something like 5 or 6 states that voted further to the left in 2016 than they did in 2012. Massachusetts was one of them. It got more liberal. So I don't think Elizabeth Warren has a concern. If she was running in Ohio, if she was running in Missouri, if she was running in Nevada, I think she'd have a major problem.
Yeah, but what about this whole Native American issue? What about the Cherokee issue? Is this going to hurt her? I mean, she looks like a loon out there right now. I mean, even loony for Massachusetts standards.
I personally, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I just don't think that's going to impact her that much. I think that there's more important pressing political issues.
That's amazing you're saying that, Nick. I know you're kind of a centrist Democrat, but, you know, she basically, this is a left term, this is a very left PC term, is that she appropriated a, you know, cultural appropriation to get her. She was a minor, you know, player in a college as a instructor until she started appropriating you know, the Cherokee Nation, and she got herself to Harvard and beyond. So, you know, I think that's pretty crappy of her. And now she's basically saying it's entirely anecdotal, but she believes it's anecdotal, but she won't take a test to prove it, you know?
Yeah, I think that's wrong. I don't think it's going to become an issue just because I think the attention span of the average voter is very short. But I think it is absolutely. I think it's
but
bogus.
You don't think they're going to? I mean, they're talking. She was just on TV this Sunday, and the hosts are all banging her on it. The Cherokee Nation is telling her to get out of here. You're not one of us. We don't want you. And she said, "Well, I am who I am." And apparently, yesterday at a rally somewhere, a day before yesterday, she was in tears over it. You know, I know who I am, and my mother and my grandmother. I mean, she looks like a total idiot.
Her lie is catching up to her.
Exactly.
Her lie is catching up to her.
I mean, this is a state that re-elected Senator Kennedy, who killed a woman on Chappaquiddick. So, I mean, we're capable of anything. But I don't know. What do you think, caller? Is that going to hurt her?
I think, I mean, she definitely has aspirations of national office beyond, you know, presidency or whatever. this is all going to stop her. And like you said, Nick, I mean, she probably will be able to be reelected in Massachusetts because she has a big war chest. And, you know, I mean, it's funny because people that are PC and Democrats, they're willing to turn their head for their own if they have to. And, you know, if a Republican tried to appropriate even a Mexican restaurant menu, they would be, you know, hauled up onto the yardarm for that one. But, you know, they're going to turn their head and vote for Elizabeth Warren. But she's not going to be able to make national office now
No,
or
she won't.
presidency because she's got too much to answer for that she can't explain.
Yeah, she definitely hurt her chances of ever becoming president of the United States. I don't think that would or should happen.
All right, let me hold you right there. Nick's back with us for the last few minutes. We've got to take a quick break. Stay right where you are. We'll be back. All right, we got a few more minutes with Nick Viveiros. Let's get back to your calls. You're next on WBSM. Good afternoon.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Elizabeth Warren will win again, and here's why. The Indian issue means absolutely nothing because in this country, you know, the burden of proof is on the accuser. And I would never take the test. No, she probably has taken the test. She probably knows what the test says. But the burden of proof in this country is on the accuser. She's been accused of not being a certain ethnic, having a certain ethnic background. It's up to somebody to prove it. I wouldn't take the test and test.
No, you're 100% right. I'm not going to argue with you over that because you're right. But the genealogists with Cherokee Nation have come out and said this chick is not one of ours.
Yeah, but they don't know that either. Listen, you know what the chances are of her being Indian blood? Her family comes from they're deep-rooted in Oklahoma. The father's name is John Herring. I mean, I think there's a pretty damn good chance of her being an Indian. But who am I to say? All
right, but so let me ask you this though: if I agree with you 100% that the burden of proof is on those who are accusing her. But if she does have aspirations of running for the White House, don't you think you want to prove that and put the issue behind you? Because you could make a lot of people look pretty small if you did take a DNA test and the test came back and said, "Oh yeah, she's full-fledged Cherokee."
Yeah, and I think that she has. I'll tell you right now, if you think that she hasn't taken a DNA test by now, I mean, everybody I know.
Oh, she would have provided the results. She did say on Sunday on TV though that she will not take a test, but I think if she had taken one, she would have provided the results. I got to hold you there. We're out of time. I appreciate it as always, my friend. So anyway, we got about 2 minutes left here, and I just wanted to get a kind of a sense of where you're heading now. So you got 2 more years to go, right?
Yeah, I think I got 5 more weeks of classes left now. I got 5 weeks until the end of the semester, then I can come back and bother you some more. And then I have a summer off. I'm going to work a couple jobs. I have to get an apartment in the city next year. Suffolk only guarantees housing for 2 years. Next year, I'm going to probably take an internship at the State House, because that's like what every PPE major does, politics, philosophy, and economics. I'm going to continue working my job in Boston, and then senior year I'm going to hopefully land an internship that somehow leads to a job. My goal for this summer, though, is to get an internship over at the Herald, the Fall River Herald, because I want to work for a newspaper, and it's so close. I work at the Lizzie Borden House, so it's right around the corner from the Lizzie Borden House. It's perfect. I write for the school paper. I'm going to have a journalism minor, so I think it'd be important, because that's the field I want to go into. This is the field I want to go into.
Into broadcast,
yeah,
or write
broadcast or print or both.
Yeah, I think you do better at broadcast.
That's because you're in broadcast.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, you're a young, good-looking guy. I think you do well.
Thank
you're smart, and
Thank you.
You know, I think you bring an awful lot to the table. I don't agree with you on everything, but you bring a lot to the table.
I appreciate
you're knowledgeable, and you're able to defend what you're saying.
Yeah.
You don't just lay something out there and let it drop. You got the facts and the information behind it. So, well, that's great. I'm glad things are going well for you, and I look forward to having you back.
Thank you for having me. I always love being on. This is one of my favorite shows to do.
Yeah, I've known Nick since he was just a little kid. Your father used to advertise at a radio station that I worked at, and he used to bring you in. He used to do commercials with him.
Yep, I remember those.
Yeah.
I remember those.
It would be, I'm John Paul, and
Nick. And Nick.
Do people stop you on the street and say, hey, you're Nick. You're the guy that was on those...
When I was younger, they used to. My dad would introduce me to them, they'd be like, you're the one that goes, and Nick. And it was... That was my first time on air. I'll never forget, at that station, one of the on-air personalities had me on air for like 5 minutes, and I was in heaven. It was like the most amazing thing. Like, I was on air on a radio station at like 8 years old.
Well, imagine being paid to do this and give your
one
opinion
day
and stuff like that.
One day.
It's going to happen for you. Nick, appreciate it. Good luck to you.
Thanks, Barry.
Best
you too.
of your family for me, all right? All right, I got to take a break. We'll come back with the last hour. Stick around. You're listening to 1420 WBSM, but we've got ABC and local news and that forecast, and we'll be right back. Stay here.